Hello, welcome to Monday, when we look at a chart of a person or event that was prominent in the news this past week. The chart that caught my attention was the chart of Vanessa Bryant, who was awarded $16 million in her suit against the county of Los Angeles. Vanessa Bryant, of course, we know as the widow of Kobe Bryant. In January of 2020, there was a horrifying helicopter accident which killed Kobe Bryant, their daughter, and then nine other people. And Vanessa Bryant was further traumatized when she learned that first responders on the scene had been taking pictures with their cell phones, which they rather ghoulishly shared around with people in the community. This came to light when people actually called the sheriff's office to complain. They said, look, I was in a bar and this guy pulled out these awful pictures, and I just don't think that's right. And of course, Vanessa Bryant and the other families agreed and did file suit in September of 2020. The other families, two of the other families settled with the County of Los Angeles, but Vanessa Bryant and one of the other parents did decide to move forward to trial, believing that this practice needed to be laid bare before the public, and the people involved needed to be held accountable. And so last week, a jury did award Vanessa Bryant and the other parent in the lawsuit $16 million for Vanessa Bryant and 15 for the other parent. So what was happening in Vanessa Bryant's chart when this story began? We do not have a birth time for Vanessa Bryant, but we do know that she was born on May 5th, 1982 in Huntington Beach, California. So I've set up a noon chart for that day. So when we think about relationships and we think about money, if we're we can't use, of course, the seventh house or the second house or the eighth house because we do not know her ascendant and how the planets would lie in the chart. But we can look to the planet Venus, which tells us something about her relationships and about money, her accumulation of physical assets. And so Venus is in the sign of Aries. And of course, we look at that and we think, oh, Venus is in detriment. We tend to say it that way, like it's, this horrible curse, but actually, Venus in detriment just means that it has certain challenges that it needs to meet, and it is more than capable of meeting those challenges. If you have Venus in Aries, I would say that you're someone who has learned in the area of relationships and when it comes to money to look after yourself. You would tend to maybe be drawn to people who are very confident, but very self-focused and self-interested, who are not into really the warm and cozy type of relationships that Venus usually enjoys if she's in a sign like Pisces or Taurus. And so when someone with Venus in Aries enters into a relationship with someone like Kobe Bryant, a basketball star, he was already a basketball star when they met, who tends to go his own way and has a lot of power. She's learned to kind of claim her own power in the relationship. And also, the course of their relationship did not go smoothly. When Uranus was passing over this Venus in 2011, she filed for divorce and they were separated for about a year while they were kind of deciding whether or not they're going to move forward. So all along, she's been a lady who has said, I'm with this very powerful, very self-directed man, and I am going to rise to his level of power and authority. And so that Venus also, if you think about money, and accumulation of resources, she would have that same attitude. She would know how to look after herself and her own interests because she may attract people who are very self-interested out for themselves, as the first responders were that took the pictures from the accident. And another thing that we need to do when we look at our Venus in Aries is to say, okay, what's Mars doing in the chart? Because Mars does rule Aries. And we say, oh, she's got Venus opposite Mars. And again, you look at Mars and you think, oh, it's uh, again, in Libra, it's in detriment. But no, Mars knows how to function in Libra. It just puts on the velvet glove. It learns eventually, as life goes on, that you catch more flies with honey than vinegar, and learns to be assertive and get what it wants, but maybe is a little more political about it, a little more tactful. And so when these two planets are in opposition to each other, we sort of have that push pull between self interest and working as a team. But these two planets are a little better at working together, even though they're pulling in different directions, because they have what's called mutual reception. Venus is in Mars's house and Mars is in Venus's house. So it's almost like they've changed houses and they've learned how to make it work, that they appreciate things about each other and they can maybe reach that point of compromise a little easier than two planets in opposition ordinarily can do. And we found that, for example, after she filed for divorce, when Uranus was setting off this opposition, they were separated for a year, but eventually they found their way back together, and had, in fact, two more daughters after that. So this is kind of a testing relationship, but one that eventually figures out how to work with two very strong individualistic people. And it's also supported in her chart by Mercury, the sign of communication, being in trine and sextile with the opposition, and Uranus being in trine and sextile with the opposition, so that she's able to kind of weather these unexpected bumps in life and kind of emerge from crisis, able to kind of mentally process her point of view, the other person's point of view, and figuring out how she can prevail. And so another thing that stands out is, just as we look at her planets, is that she has Saturn in Libra. And Saturn's exalted in Libra. Libra likes justice, fairness, things to be right for everybody. And Saturn knows that to accomplish this, it takes planning, it takes commitment, it takes the steady progress of time. So someone with Saturn in Libra has the ability to understand that I'm going to seek justice in this situation. I'm going to be very mindful about it. I'm going to allow the time it takes for it to happen. And what makes Saturn a little more extraordinary in her chart is that it's exactly square her lunar nodes. It's actually at what's called the north bending of the nodes. If you think of the nodes as being the ecliptic, Saturn has traveled up to the top above the ecliptic. It's exactly at the point where it's starting to turn and move down towards the south node. So that gives that Saturn, which is already exalted in Libra, more power in her chart, more dominance. And it also is called the turning, or a skip step sometimes in the chart when something is exactly at the square of the nodes. And so this tells us that she will have certain twists and turns in her life involving Saturn things, the structures of her life, there will be changes that happen in her life is never the same again, which certainly has been evident in her life over these past couple of years. And working with that Saturn, we've got Pluto. She was born as Saturn and Pluto were beginning to form a conjunction in Libra in the early 80s. And then making this generational aspect more personal to her life is the fact that her moon is involved. And remember, because this is a noon chart, we don't know her birth time. The moon could be anywhere from 13 Libra up to about 25, 26 Libra. So wherever it is in her chart, it is very woven into this Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So the story then began on January 26, 2020. And I think we all remember that was the beginning of some really dire things in the world. That's when we first heard the news of COVID, which in a couple of months would lock down the whole planet entirely. Everyone had kind of wondered what that Saturn Pluto conjunction would bring. And for those people who were born in the early 80s when Saturn and Pluto were forming a conjunction, this would be a particularly impactful time. If you were born during this time, kind of think back to January of 2020. Was there some sort of a life-changing event or even realization or turn in your life? And so that Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter and the South Node are all lined up here in Capricorn. And so we know Capricorn squares Libra. So this whole stellium of Saturn, Moon, and Pluto were being squared by this just massive pileup in Capricorn. What's very evident is that she was going to have her life changed forever. That Saturn, which is conjunct Pluto, which is on the north bending of her nodes. And during this time, we see Jupiter is moving into a square to that Saturn. And by September, when she files the lawsuit, she will have an exact square between Jupiter seeking justice and Saturn. That, just the horrible loss she suffered, and then this added indignity. And then if we could spend a lot of time looking at the chart for the day of the crash. But one thing, if we want to look at her Venus-Mars opposition, notice that Chiron is sitting here exactly on her Venus-Mars opposition. So a great wounding. And the ascendant at the moment of the crash was exactly, right here with Chiron. The descendant was on her Mars. So making it just a horrifying loss for her. And with her moon being involved as well, we see kind of the vast disaster of it. But that moon, that very personal, sad loss of a husband and a child. So as we've watched, Jupiter, has moved through Aquarius, through Pisces, and it has recently been in Aries. So coming up to that Venus-Mars opposition. So we'll look at Vanessa's chart on the day of the award. And we'll see that Jupiter is indeed retrograde. It's going to come back over this Venus. And we see, what else has been happening at this point. What has happened to her Venus-Mars opposition, and what has happened with her Libra planets. And so at the point that the lawsuit the jury award came in, we noticed that we have the North Node is about ready to cross her sun. Remember, it goes backwards. So it will be crossing her sun over the next few months. And that North Node is also the North-South nodal axis is in trine and sextile to her own nodal axis. So showing that, again, a very fateful move, but things moving in her direction. That justice that she was seeking was kind of came to fruition on this day. We see also that Venus is in 15 degrees Leo, and the midheaven are together here, are making a sextile to that Saturn that is seeking justice. And Saturn and Mars itself is up here on her Mercury. So making, she is in the news, probably internationally, I would imagine, for what happened. But also Mars working with her natal Venus by sextile and her natal Mars by trine. So this horrible kind of miscarriage of justice, this added indignity, has been in a sense avenged at this point. And remember how Chiron was sitting on her Venus at the time of the accident? It has moved up further into Aries, and it is opposing that Saturn, which again was seeking some justice, um, for something positive to come out of this very horrible event. And then, of course, we're going to have Jupiter moving back over this Venus over the next few months. And then early next year, we're going to have it uh, turning around in the late degrees of Pisces and going back over her Venus early next year. So I would imagine that's when the actual money is dispersed. And she has said that every cent that she's making from this award will be donated to a foundation she set up in the name of her husband and daughter in order to provide help and support for poor children who want to play sports. So that's the story of, a horrible situation, not healing, not going away, but that some good, something came out of it. As you can see the planets moving around her chart. So a very strong lady, very determined lady, definitely lives up to the potential of that Taurus sun, that she decided right off the bat that she was not going to accept any excuses or settlements, that she was going to make it clear that this happened, certain individuals are accountable, and that it should never happen to a family experiencing a tragedy like this again. So anyway, thank you for so much for listening. If you have any other insights about Vanessa's chart, I would love to hear them in the comments below, and I look forward to talking with you next week. Thank you. Bye.